Furi, recently released on the Nintendo Switch, is incredible fun, and a genuine hidden gem that you might have missed when it was originally released on PC and PS4 2 years ago. On a very basic level, Furi is a game about fighting bosses, one after another until the credits roll. That's it. Face off against a set number of powerful individuals in increasingly difficult encounters until you win. Sound simple? That's because it is. You see, Furi is the prime example of less is more, and I think that's what makes it so interesting as a game. There's a design philosophy used by lots of developers known as reductive game design, or design by subtraction, the core belief system of which is best summarised by a quote from French writer and aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who stated, "A designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." This method of designing through subtraction is not an uncommon one. In fact, some of the greatest games ever made owe a lot to this methodology for their success. From puzzle games like Threes to grander experiences like Super Mario Odyssey, the idea of carefully designing a small number of mechanics that can be expanded upon and designed around, rather than adding additional features in order to increase complexity, design by subtraction is a time-honoured concept that often yields incredible results. Furi is a game that has been designed using this methodology, and is all the better for it. For starters, the game is just about boss fights. Nothing else, spare small walking sections that link together these sparse encounters. Secondly, your character, the enigmatic stranger, has only 4 moves. On top of movement, you can dash to avoid attacks, slash with your sword to cause damage to your enemy whilst they are next to you, shoot with your gun to cause range damage, and you can also parry to stagger an enemy and regain a small amount of health whilst doing so. You have a few extra advanced abilities too, like charged variants of your slash and dun moves, as well as a perfectly timed parry leading into a special attack move. All of these, however, work more as rewards for perfect timing rather than commonly executed maneuvers you'll be doing throughout the game. Your enemies have a limited moveset too, with only 2 attack types they can use against you, so to speak. They can shoot ranged projectiles at you, or they can attempt to hit you in the head. That's not to say that every fight is the same, in fact the opposite is true. Each enemy has a specific variation on both of these attack types. For example, the third boss in the game covers the screen in orbs in order to keep you dashing to find space enough to shoot at him, whilst the fourth boss shoots long, thin beams of energy that cause visual distortions if you get hit. Although different in their design, the way of avoiding these energy-based attacks remains the same. You dash. On top of that, each of your opponents remixes their variations each time you deplete their health bars, and they transition into their next phase. Again, going back to the die with the thin beams of energy. In his second phase, these lines of death twist to make dashing to a safe space more tricky, whilst his third phase remixes them again, turning them into a screen-spanning circle of energy paired with 3 thin horizontal beams. This shared language means that you as a player enter each arena with a basic understanding of what you're about to face. You know that a white flash whilst in close quarters means they are performing a melee attack that can be parried, and that anything colourful and fired at range is an energy orb that must be avoided. This simple approach to combat, a world away from the complex combos and weapon choices offered by spectacle fighters like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, makes for a combat game that feels less like a button masher and more like the puzzle box. Each boss is a brain teaser with a solution that is implied through attack choreographing and signalling. What this means is that although initially each fight seems like an impossible task to overcome, the game is purposefully designed to give the player a number of clues as how their adversary can be defeated. Enemies have animations that trigger before they use specific moves, and patterns to their abilities that are easily identifiable after a few attempts to beat them. This is no different to any game whose focus is on defeating expertly designed bosses. Last year's Cuphead is a great example of this exact same system of signalling, for example. But Furi takes a unique stance by not offering any upgrades, new weapons, or even items to the player. The entire game is beaten using the exact same abilities and equipment you begin with. For me, this is great design distilled to its purest form. The experience of overcoming these powerful adversaries is accompanied by the knowledge that it is you, as a player, through skill and careful understanding alone, have overcome this challenge. It's an exhilarating feeling to land the final blow on an opponent who has given you hell for maybe 10 to 15 attempts. It's a rewarding sensation I haven't felt whilst playing a video game for a long time. Because, and small side note here, I really hate hard games. I can't stand them. I often find them challenging to the point of frustration rather than rewarding to the point of joy, but for some reason Furi kept me hooked because, and this was clearly an intentional design choice, it was clear through visual cues as to how I could surpass these seemingly insurmountable odds that were being stacked against me. As you may have already noticed, part of Furi's appeal comes from its striking art style too. Simplicity as a design principle is clearly demonstrated in the game's colourful and vibrant areas, which are distinct and different from one another in unique and exciting ways. Each arena is reflective of the boss that resides within them, and your brief journey throughout them is all the more evocative as a result of the game's artistic direction. On that same note, the narrative is equally as stale-bathed as the rest of the overall experience. Released from his floating space island prison cell by a mysterious ally dressed like the Rabbit, the stranger's only task is to travel down the collection of islands, defeating each jailer in order to progress on to the next. Story, if it can even be told that, perhaps brief, subtle exposition would be more apt, is primarily told by the Rabbit Man as you head towards your next opponent. Because you're never entirely clear on who you are, why you're doing this, or even why you were locked up in the first place, lends an air of mystery and excitement to the whole journey that would have been lost if the game handed you an explicit narrative straight from the get-go. Instead, this obtuse nature lends a weight that accompanies each section in between fights that ramps up in intensity to the point where each of these moments of calm begins to feel like the slow walk towards the final boss at the climax of a 60-hour long game. Except this happens every 20 minutes for about 4 hours. It's an exhausting joy of a world to scratch at, and is one of the best endings to anything I've played in about a decade. I mean, it's certainly up there anyway, it's great. Oh, and the bosses themselves are really well designed too, to the point where I genuinely want to see this cast of characters in a graphic novel or some kind of animated series. They're just really fun to spend time with. Oh, and the soundtrack is just the icing on the cake. 80s synth beats that ramp up in tempo and bass as you enter the next phase of a boss battle. Delicious. Pop it right into my mouth. Furi is a tightly designed, thrilling combat game that sunk its claws in deep and didn't let go until the credits rolled. And even after that, when it handed me harder difficulty options and a few additional boss fights to try, it still had me coming back for more. The Switch version may look a little rougher than its PC or PS4 counterparts, but Furi is a perfect fit for the Switch. It really lends itself to the pick up and play mentality that console offers, and I personally just really enjoyed playing it in bed or at work. It's good stuff, and to be honest, I thought I was going to really hate it, never mind end up totally enamoured with it, so that was a nice surprise. I love it so much actually, I'm just going to give it a big old smooch. Come here. Mwah!